Hello, everyone. This is Caleb Yoder, and I'm here to discuss our Week 3 topic on as we look through the books of Judges, or Joshua, or Deuteronomy through Judges, and then 1 Samuel through 2 Kings, some of the concerns about the leadership of humans that come about. And I think for me, one of the things that immediately sticks out and is kind of like the trend that I see throughout these books and the leaders that are present is that they are extremely human, that they are sinful, and that this is very evident. And I think the biggest thing, that one of the biggest qualities about these leaders that I see is that there is a level of selfishness that continues to overrun and continues to surface in the lives of a majority of the leaders that we see in these books. And so what I want to do is there's several key leaders that I think are very specific and that are very memorable to these books, and in their lives I think we see very evident instances and circumstances where we can see the selfishness of these leaders play out. Obviously, the first leader being Solomon, or being David, and in the life of David, obviously a very familiar story, a very popular story. We see David as a man who God called, and obviously is known in Scripture as a man after God's own heart. And this is the thing that characterizes David. But within David, and even being the figurehead leader that we see in the Old Testament, being the king of Israel that led maybe in the purest and best form, the one that is most memorable to the line of leaders that Israel had, we still see a man who sinned and who was extremely selfish. And obviously this plays out the most with the instance between him and Bathsheba, in that as a man, David saw what he wanted, and he pursued it, and he ran after it, and he took it, and then being caught in his own sin, and the consequences of his sin lead to a pregnant Bathsheba, and because of that, and to try to cover up his own sin, he has Uriah sent out, and essentially has Uriah killed. And we see sin after sin after sin come up, and sin after sin after sin line up because of David's actions. And it was like one thing led to the next, which led to the next, which led to the next. And so these are obviously levels of concern as we look at leaders and what a leader is made of. This element of selfishness and of kind of the idea that because I'm in a position of power, I can do the things that I want, and I can be selfish, and I can take what I want because of who I am, because of the title I have. These are obviously character traits that are very concerning. If you are to look, and I think this is a really interesting part, and I've seen this and really was struck by it again in reading this. But if you were to look at 2 Samuel, and you start maybe in chapter 24, and you were to read backwards, and you would see all of the destruction that happens to the people of Israel and the line of David, and all of the things that happen to his family, all of the sin that comes in with kind of like almost like the incestual relationships. You see just the killing and the destruction between brothers and between sons and sons after fathers. You see all of these different things that all of them are a consequence of this initial sin. And the whole book of 2 Samuel honestly turns in 2 Samuel 12. And so this is one of those moments where we see that this one sin had a whole trail that comes along with it. And so you see that as the selfishness of David obviously led to a lot of trouble and destruction within his own family, but also within the nation of Israel. I think if we were to look in the life of Solomon, and what we know about Solomon is that he was a very wise man, that he had knowledge and wisdom. But what we see is this instance in 1 Kings chapter 11, where the Lord basically comes to Solomon. And what we know about Solomon is that he also was a man who loved women, and when he saw a woman that he wanted, he made her his wife. And so we know that Solomon was the husband of 700 wives, and that these things are true. And so very much in the similar, following in the footsteps of his father, what does he do is that he sees women that he wants that he's not allowed to have, and he pursues them anyway. And there's this verse in 1 Kings where the Lord commands him talking about a group of women that Solomon was not to associate with. And he says, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after they are gods." And so I think it's interesting that this happens. And the next verse says that Solomon clung to them in love. And this idea of clinging, that this is this idea of clinging, this leave and cleave kind of wordage that we see in Genesis. And if you were to look in the book of Ruth, we see that Ruth clung to Naomi in the same way. These words are all tied together, and that he clung to them in a way that was for a wife. And so we know that Solomon falls in love; he pursues them. And the next verse goes on to say that his wives turned away his heart. And so I think, again, what we see is that we see a leader who is in a position of power, a position of authority, turned away because of his own selfishness and because of his turning to self and running after the things that he wanted to run after. And I think, again, later on, if you were to look at the story of Rehoboam, and the story of Rehoboam is basically Jeroboam comes and says to him that if we will come and we will serve after you. And Rehoboam goes to the council of Solomon. That was the same council that counseled Solomon, and the council says, serve them, and you will have them as your servants for the rest of your days. And then Rehoboam doesn't like that advice, so he goes to his own council, and they say you should make their yoke even harder. And so what does he do is he goes and he tells the people that this is what it's going to be, that he abandoned the counsel they wanted to hear in order to hear counsel that or he abandoned the counsel that he didn't want to hear in order to hear the words that he wanted to. And I think as we look at the position of leadership, I think this is often a thing, is that as leaders we get put in places, or as a leader, you're put in a position where you're in authority, you're over people, and you are to seek the counsel of people. And I think one of the things that's scary about this way of leading is that there's a lot of time where you have vision, where we have thoughts and things that we are passionate about, and so we seek the counsel, and when we don't hear what we want to hear, we turn to other people so that we may hear what we do want to hear, so that we know that we have support in certain ways. And I think this is a scary thing, is that if we're not seeking the proper counsel, we're not seeking counsel that gives good wisdom and good advice, that we're not seeking the correct counsel. And this is very true with this story of Rehoboam, is that he had in his mind what he wanted, and so he pursued that, and he went after that counsel even though it was the wrong thing. And obviously these decisions had lasting impacts. This leads to the divided kingdom, where now instead of just the nation of Israel, we have the nation of Judah and the nation of Israel. And so these his decisions, his selfishness lead to these acts, and this is obviously gives us a great deal of concern. I think the final thing, and the reason why I want to close with this, is I think that this story says a lot. And just I want to compare two leaders, and the leaders Manasseh and Josiah. And obviously they're very similar because of their age. Manasseh took over when he was 12 years old, Josiah at the age of 8. Josiah rules for 41 years, Manasseh rules for 45 years. And these two phrases that are described of them are basically the direct opposite. And with Manasseh, we see that he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And with Josiah, we see that he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And because of that obviously defined the leaders that they were. There's obviously in 2 Kings, there's this phrase that kind of closes, or in 2 Kings 21, verse 9, it says that Manasseh led them astray to do more evil than the nations had done, whom the Lord destroyed before the people of Israel. And basically that, Manasseh led more people astray than any other king of Israel ever did. Whereas with Josiah, we see that he is a person who does what is right in the Lord and is proactive, and we see that he helps rebuild and reestablish the temple. And I think, as we look as leaders, and I think the overarching theme that we can see is that these leaders are very human, and as we are, and any of us who are in positions of leadership know that as humans there is sin, and we will sin and we will fall short, and that is something that is inevitable because of who we are. But I think the other part of it is that there is still a decision on our parts, and there still is a place where we can do what is right in the sight of the Lord. And though we may fall, though we may sin, we still have the opportunity and the ability to do what is right in God's sight. And I think the thing that made David the king that he was, the leader he was, that in spite of his sin, in spite of maybe one of the more tragic sins that we see in the entire Old Testament, we still see a man who had a heart of gold, who knew his sin, knew his folly, knew that he had stumbled, but still was apologetic and was heartfelt and was repentant before the Lord. And because of that, he ends up becoming a king and continuing to be a leader that the Lord looks at and says that this is a man after my heart. And so I think for us, the thing that we see is that there is no way to be a perfect leader, and that we will be selfish and we will be human in our efforts. But at the same time, I think that if these stories have showed us anything, I think one of the things that I've learned through this and through this reading is that yes, we will be human. Yes, we will sin. Yes, we will be selfish. But at the end of the day, that those who do right in the sight of the Lord, that the Lord blesses and uses in bigger ways than those who choose to do evil in the sight of the Lord.